What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, a single factory on a tiny Caribbean island is quietly dismantling a trade system that has dominated the Western Hemisphere for over half a century? While the world obsesses over microchips and electric vehicles, something far more fundamental is shifting beneath our feet. Literally. And the most shocking part, almost nobody saw it coming. Here's what makes this story dangerous for some of the world's biggest economies. Every year, Jamaica spent $22 million. Let that sink in. $22 million flying out of a small island nation just to buy cement. Not luxury goods, not technology. Cement. The gray powder that builds everything from hospitals to highways. For decades, this money flowed into the pockets of Turkish factories, Panamanian suppliers, and Dominican Republic producers. But in June 2025, something changed. Something that has executives in boardrooms from Istanbul to Panama City very, very nervous. The question everyone should be asking is simple. If Jamaica has limestone, the primary ingredient for cement, why on earth was it spending tens of millions importing the finished product? The answer reveals a darker truth about how global trade actually works. It's a system designed not for efficiency, but for dependency. And Jamaica just broke free. Let me take you back to understand how deep this problem really went. Imagine you're a young Jamaican family. You've saved for years to build your first home. You've got the land. You've got the labor lined up. But then you go to buy cement and the price has suddenly jumped 30%. Not because anything changed in Jamaica, but because a factory in Turkey raised its prices. Or because a shipping company decided to increase freight costs. Or because a conflict on the other side of the world disrupted supply chains. Your dream of owning a home is now held hostage by forces you cannot control, in countries you've never visited. This wasn't just happening to families. It was crippling the entire nation. When Prime Minister Andrew Holness stood before Parliament, he didn't mince words. He said that Jamaica's inability to house its own people wasn't about land shortages or construction skills. It was about being chained to foreign cement suppliers who could turn the tap on or off at will. The Minister of Industry, Orrin Hill, put it even more bluntly. Every bag of cement we import, he said, is a job we export. Think about that. Every single bag. But here's where the story takes its first twist. While everyone was watching Jamaica struggle, a plan was already in motion. A plan so audacious that when it was first proposed, skeptics called it impossible. The Caribbean Cement Company, which had operated the Rockfort plant in Kingston since the 1950s, decided to do something radical. They wouldn't just expand production. They would completely transform it. $42 million. That was the price tag. For a small island nation, that's not just an investment. That's a declaration of war against the status quo. The project had a peculiar name. They called it the bottleneck. And that name tells you everything about Jamaica's problem. The island had limestone. It had the plant. It had the workers. What it didn't have was enough capacity in the one piece of equipment that matters most. The kiln. If you've never seen a cement kiln, picture a massive rotating cylinder, longer than a football field, heated to temperatures that would melt steel. Inside this inferno, limestone is transformed into clinker, those small gray nodules that get ground down into the cement powder we all know. The Rockfort kiln was old. It was maxed out. It was the bottleneck holding everything back. So they ripped it out and built a bigger one. But that's like saying they renovated a house when they actually rebuilt it from the foundation up. The new kiln didn't just increase capacity. It introduced automation that could adjust temperatures with surgical precision. It added a fuel system so flexible it could burn recycled tires, turning waste into energy. They redesigned the chimney to cut emissions. They built an entirely new processing house. They upgraded every single system that touched the production line. This wasn't an expansion. This was a revolution. And then came the results. Within 30 days of flipping the switch in June 2025, The Rockfort plant shattered every production record it had ever set. 93,000 metric tons of clinker in a single month. 109,000 metric tons of finished cement. Numbers that would have been physically impossible just months before. Overall capacity jumped by 30%. Jamaica went from producing 1 million tons of cement per year to 1.3 million tons. Let me put that in perspective. That extra 300,000 tons represents enough cement to build approximately 15,000 homes every single year. But here's what the numbers don't immediately tell you. For the first time in modern history, Jamaica could meet its own demand completely. The days of watching ships arrive from foreign ports, wondering if supplies would hold out, wondering if prices would spike, those days were over. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Because when you're no longer desperate for imports, you're no longer at the mercy of importers. You have leverage, you have options, you have power. Now, if you're finding this story as fascinating as I did when I started researching it, do me a favor. We're on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers, and we're building a community of people who want to understand the real economic shifts happening in our world, not just the headlines. Hit that subscribe button right now. And here's why that matters. Stories like this, stories about small nations making big moves, these don't get covered by mainstream media until it's too late. By subscribing, you're staying ahead of the curve. You're seeing the future before it becomes obvious to everyone else. All right, let's go deeper. Because the real shock isn't just that Jamaica can now supply itself. It's what comes next. Remember those countries that used to sell cement to Jamaica? Turkey, Panama, Dominican Republic. They're about to lose a customer, but it gets better, or worse, depending on which side you're on. Jamaica isn't stopping at self-sufficiency. The Caribbean Cement Company has made it clear they're eyeing export markets. And suddenly, the game changes completely. Picture the Eastern Caribbean. Small island nations like St. Lucia, Grenada, Barbados, Dominica. Most of them don't have cement plants. They're too small to justify the infrastructure, so they import everything. They've been importing from the same suppliers that used to dominate Jamaica, but now there's a new option, a closer option, a Caribbean option. Instead of cement traveling thousands of miles from Turkey or Panama, it could travel hundreds of miles from Jamaica. Shorter shipping distances mean lower costs. Shared Caribbean trade agreements mean fewer tariffs. Cultural and linguistic ties mean easier business relationships. Do you see what's happening here? Jamaica isn't just escaping dependency. It's flipping the entire script. The island that was once a customer is becoming a supplier. The nation that was once vulnerable is becoming essential. This is economic judo, using the weight of the old system against itself. And the implications are staggering. If Jamaica captures even a fraction of the regional cement market, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into the island economy over the next decade. Jobs, revenue, influence. This is how regional powers are born. But let's talk about something nobody mentions in the press releases. The technology inside that Rockfort plant isn't just impressive. It's a statement. When you dig into the details, you discover that this facility is using some of the most advanced cement production technology available anywhere in the world. The solid fuel dosing system, for instance. Most people hear that term and their eyes glaze over. But here's what it actually means. Traditional cement plants are locked into specific fuel types, usually coal or natural gas. But Rockfort's system can switch between fuels on the fly. Fossil fuels when they're cheap. Alternative fuels like recycled tires when they make more sense economically or environmentally. This flexibility is crucial, and here's why. Cement production is incredibly energy intensive. The kiln alone consumes massive amounts of fuel to maintain those extreme temperatures. In most countries, this makes cement plants major carbon emitters. But Jamaica's plant is part of CEMEX's Global Future in Action program. That's a commitment to slash carbon emissions across all facilities. By burning waste materials like old tires, Rockfort is doing two things simultaneously. It's reducing the amount of trash rotting in landfills, and it's cutting down on fossil fuel consumption. The environmental win is obvious, but the economic win is just as important. Every ton of recycled fuel used is money not spent on imported coal or gas. It's another stream of dependency cut off. And then there's the chimney. I know. A chimney doesn't sound exciting, but the redesigned emission system at Rockfort represents something profound. For years, industrial development and environmental protection were seen as opposites. You could have one or the other, but not both. Jamaica is proving that's a false choice. The new air handling systems capture pollutants more effectively. The chimney design optimizes airflow to reduce emissions. The result? A plant that produces 30% more cement while actually cleaning up its environmental footprint. That's not just good engineering. That's a blueprint for how developing nations can industrialize without destroying their natural environments in the process. Now let's talk about something that doesn't show up in production statistics, but might be the most important outcome of this entire project. Skills, knowledge, capability. Over 200 Jamaican contractors worked on the Rockfort expansion. These weren't just laborers moving materials around. These were skilled tradespeople installing cutting-edge industrial equipment, engineers calibrating automated systems, technicians learning how to maintain some of the most sophisticated machinery in the cement industry. Every single one of those workers left the project with experience they didn't have before, experience that makes them more valuable, more employable, more capable of taking on the next big industrial project that comes to Jamaica. Prime Minister Holness specifically highlighted this point. He said the project helps Jamaican workers grow in scientific, technical, and engineering fields. That's not political rhetoric. That's recognizing a truth that too many development projects ignore. Infrastructure isn't just about the physical structures you build. It's about the human capacity you develop along the way. Those 200 contractors are now 200 experts. They can train others. They can start their own companies. They can take on projects across the Caribbean. This is how you build an industrial workforce from the ground up. But here's the twist that makes this entire story even more compelling. While Jamaica was executing this transformation, the rest of the world was distracted. The global media was focused on tech IPOs and cryptocurrency crashes. Trade analysts were watching U.S.-China tensions. Development economists were debating debt relief packages. And in that moment of distraction, Jamaica made a move that repositions it on the entire Caribbean chessboard. Because cement isn't just cement, it's leverage. Think about it strategically. If you're a Caribbean nation that relies on Jamaican cement for your construction industry, Jamaica suddenly matters to you in a new way. Your housing projects depend on their supply. Your infrastructure development depends on their production schedules. Your construction costs depend on their pricing decisions. This isn't about dominance. It's about relevance. It's about becoming essential to your neighbor's success. And in geopolitics, being essential is everything. There's also a philosophical shift happening here that goes beyond economics. For over a century, the Caribbean has been defined by what it consumes. Sugar produced for European tables, bauxite mined for North American aluminum, tourism serving visitors from wealthy nations. The region's identity has been shaped by its role as a supplier of raw materials and a consumer of finished goods. Jamaica's cement revolution inverts that relationship. The island is taking its own raw material, limestone, and transforming it into a finished product. Then it's using that product domestically and preparing to export it regionally. This is the move from extraction economy to production economy, from dependency to self-determination. When Prime Minister Holness said, "Instead of importing, we will be exporting. Instead of consuming value-added goods, we will be producing them," He was articulating something bigger than trade policy. He was describing a new vision for what Caribbean nations can be in the 21st century. Not just service economies living off tourism and remittances, but industrial economies that make things, build things, and sell things on their own terms. And if cement can be the catalyst for that transformation, what else becomes possible? Consider the ripple effects that are just beginning. With cement costs stabilizing, Jamaica's government can accelerate its social housing program. That program aims to provide affordable homes for the nation's most vulnerable families. Before Rockfort's expansion, the economics were shaky. Construction costs fluctuated with import prices. Budgets became unreliable. Projects stalled. Now, with predictable local supply, those homes can be built faster and cheaper. That means families who have been waiting years might finally get keys to their own front doors. That means children growing up in stable housing instead of overcrowded tenements. That means elderly Jamaicans living out their years in dignity rather than uncertainty. The same logic applies to infrastructure. The Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, critical for connecting tourist destinations and facilitating trade, was vulnerable to material shortages. Every delay in cement delivery meant delays in road construction. Delays in road construction meant delays in economic development. Now those bottlenecks are gone. The highway can proceed on schedule. And when it's complete, it will cut travel times, reduce transportation costs, and open up regions of Jamaica that have been economically isolated for decades. Schools and hospitals benefit in exactly the same way. Jamaica, like every nation, needs to constantly maintain and expand its public infrastructure. Every new classroom, every new hospital wing, every new community center requires cement. With local production meeting demand, the government no longer has to choose between projects based on cement availability. They can make decisions based on need, based on impact, based on what will actually improve people's lives. That's not a small thing. That's transformative. But let's address the elephant in the room. $42 million is a lot of money for Jamaica. Was it worth it? Let's do some quick math. Jamaica was spending over $22 million per year just on imported Portland cement. That's one type of cement. Total cement imports were even higher. Let's be conservative and say Jamaica was spending $30 million annually on all cement imports. The Rockfort expansion cost $42 million. That means the project pays for itself in less than 18 months purely from import substitution. And that's before we even count the export revenue Jamaica will generate, or the jobs created, or the economic multiplier effects, or the strategic positioning. When you add all that up, this might be one of the highest return infrastructure investments any Caribbean nation has made in decades. And here's something that should worry Jamaica's former suppliers. This model is replicable. If Jamaica can pull this off with cement, why couldn't Trinidad do the same with steel? Why couldn't Barbados do it with pharmaceuticals? Why couldn't the Bahamas do it with specialized maritime equipment? The blueprint is now public. Take a critical import. Invest in local production capacity. Cut dependency. Stabilize costs. Create jobs. Position for exports. Suddenly, the entire Caribbean could be looking at Jamaica and thinking, if they can do it, why can't we? That's the real revolution happening here. It's not just about one cement plant. It's about shattering the psychological barrier that keeps small nations locked in dependency. For too long, countries like Jamaica were told they were too small to manufacture at scale, too remote to compete with global producers, too poor to make the necessary investments. Rockfort proves all of that wrong. You don't need to be China or Germany to build industrial capacity. You need to be strategic. You need to be committed. And you need to be willing to make bold moves when the opportunity presents itself. So where does this leave us? Jamaica has spent decades as a price taker in the global cement market. As of June 2025, it's a price maker. It has gone from vulnerable to resilient, from dependent to independent. and potentially from customer to supplier. The $42 million Rockfort expansion isn't just an industrial upgrade. It's a statement, a declaration that small nations are no longer content to play supporting roles in the global economy. They're ready to write their own scripts. And now I want to hear from you, because this raises a massive question that I think we need to debate. If one factory can trigger this kind of transformation in Jamaica, which industry should they target next? Should it be renewable energy to cut dependence on imported oil? Should it be tech manufacturing to create high-wage jobs? Should it be pharmaceutical production to control medicine costs? Or is there another sector entirely that could have even bigger impact? Drop your answer in the comments below. Tell me which industry you think Jamaica should revolutionize next and why. I'm genuinely curious to see what this community thinks, because some of you might spot an opportunity that economists and policymakers are completely missing. The Rockfort story proves that the future isn't written by the powerful, it's written by the bold. And right now, on a small island in the Caribbean, they're writing a new chapter. One $42 million cement plant at a time.